Hi, this is Brass Check, and we're recording this on December 10th, 2018. This just happens to be the 50th anniversary of the death of Thomas Merton. And Brass Check appears to be one of the only news outlets anywhere to even notice. And I guarantee we're the only news outlet that's going to raise the question of how Thomas Merton actually died. But before we do that, we have to talk about who Thomas Merton was. Thomas Merton was a writer who became a Catholic monk, and he was very dedicated to his religion, and he wrote some very popular books that sold in the hundreds of thousands of copies, and he was a very prominent public figure. He was probably the most popular person in the Catholic Church when he died, and he was outspoken against the Vietnam War. He died December 10th, 1968. That year may resonate with you because that is the same year that Martin Luther King died. And it's the same year that Robert F. Kennedy died. And it is the year that a huge number of servicemen died in Vietnam. 16,597 to be precise. In fact, you could say that 1968 was the year that the U.S. went all in the Vietnam War. So let's put Thomas Merton's death in context. Earlier in the year, the most popular African-American, the most respected African-American leader in the United States, Martin Luther King, was killed under very suspicious circumstances. His family does not believe the official story. I do not believe the official story. Anybody that's looked at it would be pretty dumb to believe the official story. And the official story, of course, is some bumbling, low-level petty crook decided spontaneously to shoot King. And this bumbling petty crook somehow managed to get himself first to Canada and then to England, things that cost a lot of money, especially in those days, but he was able to do it with no money in his pocket. Months later, Robert F. Kennedy, the most popular Democratic politician, the most, he was on the verge of becoming the party's candidate for president, was shot in the back of the head at close range by someone standing 5 feet in front of him. That's pretty suspicious too. And now we have Thomas Merton, the most popular Catholic priest and writer, certainly the most popular Catholic writer, and I'm going to guess the most popular Catholic priest in general. Like Martin Luther King, like Robert F. Kennedy, outspoken against the war. And somehow on December 10th, 1968, he ended up dead. And the story is he was accidentally electrocuted by a fan. Now, I sought the help of some people that have very specific knowledge about this case in preparation for developing an audio documentary to make people aware of the story and give it the prominence it deserves. After all, it is the 50th anniversary. And I was responded to with mindless hostility from these people. So I did not get the help I was hoping for, and therefore I will not mention their names. But I can tell you this. These are facts relating to the death of Thomas Merton. Number one, there was no autopsy. And number two, there was a report of sorts, but it was not on any official letterhead, and it wasn't signed by anyone. Number 3, there was a photograph of the body as it was found. And it sure did not look like somebody who, was electrocuted and fell over. That photograph is owned by I believe it's the Trappist monks, of whom he was a member. They're holding it. They're not letting anybody see it. Number 4, he had a pretty significant head wound that was bleeding profusely, which is very strange for someone who gets electrocuted and falls to the floor. So if we look at all those things, no autopsy, no police report, a photograph that no one's allowed to see, and profuse bleeding from the head, we have to wonder about how he really died. There is a ludicrous theory floating around out there, launched relatively recently, that he committed suicide over grief relating to some kind of romantic entanglement. It's not even worth entertaining that one. So there we have it. Thomas Merton, easily the most popular Catholic writer, possibly the most popular Catholic priest, absolutely outspoken in his opposition to the Vietnam War in 1968. And just like Robert F. Kennedy in 1968, and just like Martin Luther King in 1968, he somehow ended up dead. And to go back to something I said earlier, 1968 was the year for the Vietnam War, at least as far as the United States war machine was concerned. 16,597 American servicemen were killed that year. 50% more, 50% more than any other year of the war. Now, who killed him? And there we have to look to motivation. Well, the Vietnam War was a highly profitable enterprise for many people. Number 1, arms manufacturers. It was just free money. Number 2, the Vietnam War was very profitable for, we'll call them elements of the CIA. A little history. Everybody knows about the Opium Wars of the 19th century. Everybody knows that England, sent gunboats to China to force the Chinese to take opium. The leaders of China wanted to keep it out of the country. The British said, nope, you're going to take it and we're going to sell it. Not as well known, the Second Opium War, the French were involved as well because they were making money from selling opium to China. When the French took over Vietnam, they introduced opium to Vietnam. And within a very short period of time, the tax on opium sales in Vietnam was enough to pay the bills for the French to, quote, administer these people that they had taken over. So the French had a long history of bringing opium and drugs into Vietnam and making them available for sale. During World War II, they got cut off from their supply. Now, the supply of opium that the British used came from India, and the supply of opium that the French used came from places like Iran and Afghanistan and Turkey. Thus, the French connection. That later became a pathway via Corsica to the United States for the heroin trade. But during World War II, the French and the British were sort of cut off from their normal supplies of opium, and everything was created sort of a mess over there, to say the least. And so the French were getting their opium from what's now called the Golden Triangle, so the highlands of Laos and parts of Vietnam and southern China. When the French got kicked out of Vietnam, the U.S. picked up that drug trade, and it became a very important cash cow. And it remained a cash cow throughout the Vietnam War. And people that know the history of this know that out in the field, troops were being encouraged to develop drug habits so that they would stay close to home and do what the commanders perceived needed to be done. So heroin was available. It was not fought. It was not combated. It was actually encouraged because it kept the fighters fighting. And a lot of money was made in that heroin trade in Vietnam. And a lot of it was made by members of the CIA. That's indisputable. They were making so much money that one CIA agent had to create a bank, Nug in hand, in Australia, just to launder the proceeds. So Merton was killed in Thailand, which was a CIA playground. And what do you think the CIA's attitude would have been towards somebody who was very powerful intellectually, very prominent, very respected, very influential, not unlike Martin Luther King, not unlike Robert F. Kennedy, who was speaking out against the war? So if we're looking for who had the motivation to kill Merton, it's pretty obvious who did. So Thomas Merton, December 10th, 1968. We're recording this on December 10th, 2018, 15 years later, and we are among a very, 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 very small handful of news outlets to even acknowledge the 50th anniversary of his death, which is bizarre given how important he was and still is. He's still considered a very important writer. But nobody's talking about the mysterious nature of his death, the unlikely nature of his death, the sketchy nature of his death. So that's Brass Check. And now you know who Thomas Merton is, and now you know why he's important. You can Google him. You can see all the books he wrote. You can read about his biography, and you can just imagine this, how significant it was for somebody of his stature to suddenly be gone. And that the coincidence of 1968 with Martin Luther King being killed and Robert F. Kennedy being killed and 16,597 American servicemen being killed, that coincidence is just a little bit too much of a coincidence. So that's Brass Check and something to think about.